Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where I take a look at records of a solid foundation, but a spotty execution, and making a smoother listening experience out of it all. While I'm not doing a themed month this year around Wu-Tang Clan, I figured I'd still do a hip-hop related Redacted in honor of Black History Month, and take a look at a different icon within the scene who actually last year just showcased why he's still one of the best to grace a mic by not only celebrating his 50th birthday, but finishing a 6-album saga that showcased that he is easily the best from his era still working. Talking, of course, about Nasir Jones. But the subject of this month isn't going to be any of those 6 albums, because I think that both trilogies he did with Hit Boy are incredible. I think that they showcase his pen game is not weak whatsoever still to this day, and he still seemingly has a lot of gas left in the tank. Instead, I'm going to be throwing it back 25 years to the magical year of 1999, where Nas was trying to blend his own brand of storytelling from the streets with his own autobiographical twist, and having those same sort of foreboding ideas that were coding 1999 as the new millennium approached. The albums in question are his 3rd and 4th album, both dropped in 1999, that I'm going to be pulling together into a proverbial 3rd album from Nas, I Am, and Nastradamus, into one collective piece that I'm going to call I Am Nastradamus.
Yeah, nasty, Nas the Esco, the Escobar. Now he is Nastradamus. Nasty, Nas the Esco, the Escobar.
Now the story of these records is interesting because in 1999, Nas wasn't going to drop these 2 albums. He was instead going to drop one album called I Am, the Autobiography, which was leaked online prior to its release and led to Nas scrapping the project pretty much altogether and reworking it into these 2 records while recording other songs to sort of fill in some of the tracks he decided to leave on the cutting room floor / save for projects like the Lost Tapes album compilation, which dropped in the early 2000s, which had stayed on the cutting room floor for decades until last year on Record Store Day, they dropped the original version of I Am, the Autobiography in stores for a Record Store Day exclusive, which I think is kind of interesting. But my goal today wasn't to build my own version of that. Instead, it was going to be to bring together a lot of the ideas he ended up cooking on these 2 records into a cohesive experience that sits a little bit longer than both, but I think showcases a lot of the strengths in the producers he was working with, the strengths and the features that he decided to bring into the booth, while also keeping all of those themes that I sort of talked about, him trying to coalesce into one release into a nice sort of through line. While I wouldn't say I Am and Nastradamus are apart my favorite Nas albums, I do think that both have their own strengths, and I think that marrying these 2 projects together creates an interesting listening experience that I do hope that you enjoy. I did include some of the tracks that were scrapped from I Am, the Autobiography that ended up on the Lost Tapes onto this project as well, to sort of lend to the flow of the project and create the sort of ebb and flow and intensities and subject matters that I think really showcases a good show-stopping closer for Nas to close out the 90s with. The finished result ended up being as long as I Am, given it is 16 tracks and 1 hour and 4 minutes long. And I'm not doing a track-by-track breakdown like I normally would in this sort of circumstance, because I thought, until literally the editing bay, that I had 1 extra track. Either way, let's go ahead and show off the track listing before breaking it down track by track, why I laid it out the way that I did.
Crafted, blacklisted, hair twisted, ghetto embargo lifted, power shifting, comb fisted, I predict goddesses, you running after witches.
Rolling thick, the 6 ones parole flip. 5 niggas went to 4 quick when he went OT. College life, I let y'all niggas bang my shit before Saddam hits. Let Nostradamus tell us what time it is. I was the first one on that infant size, a prophet in his early stages. Mother in the early 30s was married to Pops, wishing what she carried with. Hate the money I see, clothes that I buy, ice that I wear, flows that I try. Close your eyes, picture me rolling. Come get me if you real, cause I ain't scared. It's all fair, love and war, we can take it there. You don't like me, clown? Now you know I'm hugged up with this bitch in the tub. Palm Springs, Al Capone suite, washing her feet. Is this love? Somebody's wife.
Got no father, cause you played it sweet. Now you floating in the harbor. Shit is hectic, so respect it for your health.
Dear Pac, every thug sheds a teardrop and use teeth to bite off beer tops and pour out a little liquor. Use tarot cards, you can see the Pharaoh Nas. I am Mike, Messiah type. Before the Christ, ask a world, watch what you do. Snook from Red Hook was grimy, did 5 years. Glad to be home from
You won't see me tonight. You won't see me tomorrow. I'll be gone by.
And I forget this, I rob you, put you on my hit list. Under my nails is dirty, look at the grind, my burnt lips.
Many are too scared of new data. America Online, cut off, see you later. Yo, welcome to the new world.
Rolling dice, symbol of the drama yet to come. Too late to run, time traveling was late. Watching was a blind.
I started this album, how Nastradamus starts, with the prediction, a spoken word sort of piece delivered by Jessica Care Moore that I think sets the stage really well. It was 1999. A lot of artists were sort of thinking about the oncoming millennium. Y2K fear was lingering in the air, and I think that this sets the stage pretty fucking well, and I think leads into New York State of Mind Part 2 from I Am fantastically. And I think if Nas were to have this sort of full circle moment in 1999, I think that this had to be included here, and I wanted to have this sort of comparison to where he started with now, with, you know, New York State of Mind being the second track on his third album as well. And I think it's a decent sequel song. It updates the sort of POV he's writing from, like on New York State of Mind, pretty strongly, and I think that it's a damn good sequel. Which from there, I wanted to pivot into the title track, which apparently was a freestyle track from Nas, and I think he just kind of graces this well-constructed beat fantastically with a strong hook at its core. I felt like if I was going to bring the sort of title track in, I feel like after the sequel of New York State of Mind was a really strong place to go to before pivoting into really serious territory after that with Fetus, a track that was scrapped from the original I Am, the autobiography that ended up on the Lost Tapes, and sees Nas rapping as a fetus throughout the 9 months of gestation with his mom. It's an interesting song concept that has this serious tone to its beat that I wanted to sort of slide in after that to set a little bit of a darker tone that I think the next couple of tracks kind of dive into, because from there I go into Hate Me Now, which I think comes in after the birth of Nas at the end of Fetus pretty fucking well. The track sort of has this... The track opens with Diddy saying that it's Escobar season because Nas is now born. It's a huge, bombastic, dramatic sounding ass jam with another really good hook propelling it, and I think is a good 1999 ass rap song to sort of have Nas having his own slice of the Diddy era showcased really strongly before pivoting into another really good jam from Nastradamus, Come Get Me. A DJ Premier produced cut where he addresses his haters a little more directly. You know, he talks about being hated on the track prior, but he's getting a little more direct with his call-outs on that track, which the track itself is a great-ass jam, but ends with this weed skit about weed drops and how these weed drops are so much better than smoking, and honestly kind of feels like a little bit ahead of its time in the way that it's sort of presented. But when it came to following that skit up, I kind of had a couple of places I wanted to take it, but when looking at the tracks from the original project that were scrapped and ended up elsewhere, I saw Blaze of 50 was on the Lost Tapes, and I feel like if I was going to go into anything from this weed skit, I think Blaze of 50 is probably the best place to go. A good storytelling-filled song that has another sort of just string-filled pseudo-dramatic beat that I think Nas sort of uses to extend his own storytelling ideas pretty amicably, but I wanted to keep the dramatics from there and sort of ramp them up a little bit more by going into the collaboration with DMX, Life Is What You Make It, which feels like a DMX track, or at least production-wise feels more inspired by DMX's stuff, with Nas and DMX having some good chemistry. Just, again, getting gangster as fuck on a 1999-ass beat. DMX was one of the big hitters in 1999, and I think it's cool that Nas decided to tap him so early on in his career. And again, my big focus when keeping a lot of the features was focusing on the heavy hitters in the late 90s, and I think if there was ever going to be someone else to end up on here, I mean, there's a couple other features later on that definitely feel very 1999, but DMX and Nas doing just a gangster rap track felt very necessary for this duology, and I had to keep it here. Plus, I think it pivots really well into We Will Survive, a track that gets a lot more personal and a lot more reflective with Nas, looking at the deaths of Biggie and Pac, and also sort of taking some jabs at Jay-Z for trying to take sort of Biggie's place as the king of New York, while Nas is here dropping classic after classic up to this point. I think it's a good sort of emotional pivot from the last couple of tracks where he's keeping it sort of storytelling driven and gangster as fuck, by getting a little more sincere at the sort of tragedies that the decade prior had seen, and sort of add to the sort of like reflections on the 90s that crop up in parts of this album. But I wanted to keep those mellow vibes sort of going instrumentally by pivoting into project windows that sort of flips the lyrical coin away from the icons that we had lost, and sort of his observation on the big rappers in the game now, by turning his focus back into the streets and sort of doing more storytelling from his POV in the streets, and I think does so really fucking well. There's some great bars on Project Windows, which I think the mellowness and sort of pseudo-grandiosity of that beat, I think does a good job at sort of leaning into Nas's like a track that sort of gets even more personal, while the last couple of tracks have spent looking at the people in the game that he's gotten close with, to the streets themselves. I felt like we should have brought it back to Nas, the man, the myth, given these albums were supposed to be the autobiography, which Nas is like does a good job at sort of pivoting the sonic palette back into what I Am has a lot going on with its sort of beat style and sort of production choices within the beats that I use to carry through the next couple of the tracks. But I think Nas is like is another really good single from this era that keeps the dynamics across what he's sort of juggling lyrically intact strongly. From there, I pivot into two Timbaland-produced tracks. The storytelling-filled Small World, which has Nas doing the sort of storytelling from the streets, talking about how small the world really is and the connections that one makes within dealing. And You Won't See Me Tonight, another collaboration with another late 90s icon, the late Aaliyah, which is one of the few moments where Nas talks a little bit more about his relationship, or at least a relationship with this woman of the night, and Aaliyah sort of spins that identity into a really strong hook. Both are really good beats from Timbaland, and I think, again, as far as, like, Nas doing late 90s ass shit, like working with producers that were coming up and stars, I think those two tracks are really strong ones that continue a lot of the theme/work with artists that I think pull together a really good collaboration. From there, I wanted to sort of build up to this large climax. You know, I had 3 I Am songs, and I closed it with 3 Nastradamus songs, starting with Last Words, a good sort of, again, theatrical-ass, near the end of the album track that has Nas spinning this POV of slaves as marginalized black men stuck inside of the prison system that loves to keep them down, and I think that it's a well-constructed song that sees him coming together with Nashawn and creating this good-ass allegorical-filled track that really deconstructs an aspect of street life that does get highlighted a lot in hip-hop, but I think has done so very eloquently here. And again, similarly to Come Get Me, I had this moment where I wasn't sure where I wanted to end it up with after that. I had this earlier in the track listing because it also has a sort of spoken word outro, but instead of leaning into anything I had before, I instead use it to pivot into one of the biggest oddities from this duology, but absolutely had to be here if we're doing this 1999 ass album, with New World. A track that, again, sees Nas sort of reflecting on the decade, the turn of the millennium, and where things are shaping up to be. Him trying to play Nostradamus of sorts, as he has throughout pockets of this, with a beat that samples Toto's Africa.
Energized rides, no steering wheel, tell it how to drive, no propellers in the sky.
It's a very 1999-ass use of its sample, I will say. You know, given Nas co-wrote tracks like Will Smith's Getting Jiggy With It, it's clear he kind of dips into that style of hip-hop, and while he doesn't do it much, I feel like I had to have one track here to definitely embody that. And again, if we're talking about late 90s-ass trends, Nas doing so on here, while bafflingly weird, I think it's a nice sort of last track to send the album off into the horizons before the outcome brings it full circle and bookends the project with another spoken word piece, while Jessica Care Moore does that spoken word weaving like she did on the intro to, again, sort of bring this album to a really strong resolve. And that's my version of I Am Nostradamus. Did it sound interesting to you? If it did, linked in the description is a Spotify and a YouTube link. If you did like this episode of Redacted, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. I do have another Freddy Fish for Freddy Fish February dropping on Saturday. Hopefully you're excited for that. Hopefully you did like this. Either way, I'm going to go. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.